guys for the first. Okay, good evening. We are back in action. This is just like edge of your seat kind of stuff. So this is the August 31st, 2016 meeting of the Development and Governmental Relations Subcommittee to the Holyoke City Council. To my right is the Ward 2 Councilor, Nelson Roman. To my right is at-large Councilor Peter Tallman. To my left is at-large Councilor Mike Sullivan, and I'm the chairman. And with us are Marcos Marrero and John Dijek from the Office of Planning and Economic Development. Councilor McGivern has texted me. He's going to be running a little bit late because he's got a prior commitment, but he'll be joining us at some point. So I think the first thing we're going to go to is, if we could, item 2 on the agenda. If I could just...
Motion to take up item number 2.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
motion on the, we're going to put on the floor. This is ordered that in accord with Mass General Law, Chapter 59, the City Council approve and ratify an agreement between the City of Holyoke and Mount Tom Solar Limited Liability Company for a payment in lieu of taxes, also known as a pilot, for certain personal property tax obligations. We will just, so with us are Marcos and John. I think all the body here received the pilot agreement. Just for housekeeping, I went through it. I'm just going to briefly summarize it, and then Marcos and John, if you want to sort of take it from there. But I'll basically, for the folks at home, this is in Smith's Ferry, and it's the area with the former Mount Tom power plant. And this technical address is 200 Northampton Street, and it's almost on the East Hampton line. And so what's happening here is a limited liability company has been formed. And one of the things Marcos will talk about is that there was a citizens group that got together and for Holyoke for a course of a year, and they thought of some ideas about what could fit in this place, and one of them is a solar field. And so in fact, what happened is that this company formed a limited, who own the Mount Tom power plant, and Marcos can speak to more about that. They formed a limited liability company, and they're going to put in solar panels. And so what we're contemplating here is whether we're going to approve an agreement negotiated between the City of Holyoke and this limited liability company so that the city could receive revenue based upon the megawatt solar power of these solar panels over a 20-year period. So, Marcos, John, I hope I pretty much hit it right.
Absolutely.
And then why don't you gentlemen take it from there?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having us.
Hold on. Time out. On behalf of every member of this committee, and I know the whole City Council and the City of Holyoke at large, probably Western Mass, we congratulate you and your bride on the birth of your first son?
Yes.
Okay, congratulations. So well done. Well done. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Proceed accordingly.
And with that, if I say anything incoherent, please attribute it to the lack of sleep over the last 6 days. So, as you were describing, this site has plenty of recent history in terms of the concerns of the citizenry and the city government on the actions there. In 2011, the City Council created, through ordinance, what was called a Citizen Advisory Group, out of the concern that the production of power from the Mount Tom coal-powered plant was ramping down. And with that ramp down came a reduction in the tax income to the city, because the agreement with the power plant was somewhat dependent on, or to a large extent dependent on, how much they were producing. At this point in time, the power plant, as most of us know, is now decommissioned. It's offline. as is, I believe, all coal-fired power plants in the state. It's something that has, the market has driven coal power plants out in Massachusetts, as well as regulations and cheap gas. So with that. Back in 2011, the City Council created this group in order to look at alternatives for uses on the site, and it set as a milestone having a final report provided to the City Council. Last year, I believe, that report was completed. For a few years there, it was a matter of finding the resources to get a professional study. As by the ordinance, it was get a professional grade study done for reuse options. That presentation was provided with the consultants from Ninigret, Time Bond, and others in that group. And it looked at the constraints in the site. It's right off the Connecticut River. Most of it is in the floodplain. And with that, the real constraint is anything that you put in the floodplain. First of all, there's some things you just can't put in the floodplain. But the things that are allowed in a floodplain, you would be technically in three-dimensional space, you would be displacing water if and when the water levels would go up. So any type of development in the floodplain would require compensatory storage. Essentially, if you put something in, you have to take something out. That is, when you can do it, it's particularly expensive, and you need to have access to other land to do it. This whole explanation is to say most of the land that we know today associated with the Mount Tom coal power plant is undevelopable. The only reason why it was operating was because it was just grandfathered as a use there before these floodplain regulations were in place. So the reuse study identified some potential reuses on the site, but the areas where it was particularly in the floodplain, it was seen as a good place to put solar energy farms, because if you can't put anything else, how can you make it be productive? It's clearly a site that's already wired for generating power, so this was seen as a highest and best use, if you will. The pilot that's before you is not even for a solar farm on the entirety of the field. It's for it's not small, but certainly a small proportion of the site. I don't have the exact number in front of me.
38% of the...
About 38% of the parcel. It's just south of where the coal was being stored on the site. And it's almost 6 megawatts. The pilot before you is $5,000 per megawatt. So roughly speaking, for the next 20 years, if approved, this pilot would provide the city with the income equivalent of a, say, $750,000 building in a place where otherwise we really wouldn't be able to get anything.
Okay, Marcos, thank you very much. So what happens at the end of 20 years?
Well, at the end of the 20 years, the pilot is no longer in effect. Realistically, with the technology, the solar field would likely just be decommissioned. In 20 years, the solar technology will probably be better. It'll probably be uninstalled, and either something else is built there or a better solar field.
Okay, but do they get to, but say that doesn't happen, and the technology is still valid, what does the city see as I know we get the property tax, but what about, the real property tax? What about the personal property tax?
Well, the city could get the personal property tax at the end of 20 years, if that's the question. The personal property tax would be so low, because after 20 years, the equipment is just almost worthless.
Well, I guess, how do we come up with the 20 years? I guess that's the question then, so.
The 20-year pilot is the standard that the city does. The reality is that with solar farms, an owner is allowed to depreciate them at an accelerated rate. So while the city could hypothetically get a lot of taxes in the first year or two, by the third or fourth year, the depreciation is so much that you're not getting a lot of taxes. What the pilot does is it allows for a smaller payment, but for a much longer period of time. That makes the financing of the project work on the developer's end, and it actually nets the city more money over time.
So theoretically, if they're going to come in and put new solar panels in there, I guess the city could come up with a new pilot agreement. Why couldn't we? Why we couldn't negotiate a
Sure.
new agreement?
Sure, because at the end of 20 years, so if they were to install a new solar field, then I don't want to use the word threat, but the scenario is you're putting something in new. It's highly valued, so you're either paying the property tax on that, which if it's like today, right? I can't tell what 20 years from now is going to look like, but if it's like today, it may not work financially, therefore there's no installation. So you either come in for a new pilot at that time, 20 years from now, or you decide to pay the property tax, or there's just no project.
Yeah, so, yeah, this contract doesn't really talk about, it ends at 2037, and that's
it.
it doesn't really talk about a possibility of a future city of Holyoke government kind of working on that. I guess they don't want to, I can understand that, but it just ends in 2037. Okay, well, I mean, to me, let's see. Let me see if I have any other questions while I was scanning this over today. So the public should be aware that in FY17, they're not really going to have their solar panels up and running until December. So the city of Holyoke in this fiscal year will get about $14,000. Subsequent fiscal years will get close to $29,000. And that'll be over the following 19 years of this agreement. So I really don't have any other questions. Anybody else have a question from the committee? Councilor Roman.
Marcos, thank you so much. Thank you, John, for being here. With regards to the pilot funds, I know fiscal year 17 will be 14,410, correct? And then fiscal year 2018 will be 28,820. My question for all of these pilots, and again, I would just like to know, is that fund just goes into the general fund, correct? So that's just money that's going into our general fund?
That's my understanding, yes.
For these pilots, especially with Mount Tom or something like this, we keep talking as a council here about investing and saving in our stabilization fund. Is there any laws or anything that's prohibiting the city of Holyoke from directly putting these funds for a long period of time directly into our stabilization fund?
Not that I know of. As far as I know, income is income, and political leadership, council, mayor, can decide to do with it what it may. Either it goes directly into the general fund, and political leadership decides to create a carve out from that, or just do a revolving fund or something like what you're saying, so that it goes directly, to like a deposit into savings, right? I don't see a reason why that couldn't happen, but I guess it would be a question for the law department. Nothing comes to mind of why it wouldn't be possible.
I think for me, again, we're talking about the finances of the city, especially something like Mount Tom, and I appreciate the value of this agreement. For me, though, I would like to see that long-term short investment go to our stabilization fund, because we've seen, because I'm looking at how low that number is, and then we're saying, hey, that money will then be earmarked. If it's just in the general fund, it'll be gone tomorrow. So for me, I would like to see, specifically with this specific pilot and other pilots in the future, if this one could be earmarked to that. So thank you.
So, Counselor, if you want to file an order to the effect that would say, we, the city council, would strongly recommend to the mayor and to his financial team, the city auditor and what else, that we find a source of funds to dedicate to the increasing stabilization. And for example, the pilots. And if you write something like that, I'd be happy to join it with you. So
I will do that. Thank
if
you.
Want to do that? Any other councilors want to speak? No. Any questions for Marcos or John on this matter? Okay. Well, we have a pilot agreement in front of us. We should get a motion to either approve or not approve pilot.
Motion to approve the pilot?
Second.
On the motion, under discussion, hearing none. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? None. Okay, so we approve recommendation of the pilot for nothing. So let me just mark that down. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, let's see. 3 and 4, Councilor Roman, did you want to take 3 up separately, or does it matter to you?
No, I'm fine with taking 3 and 4 as a package.
Okay, that's a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion to suspend rules, take 3 and 4 in a package. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, before us are orders filed by Nelson Roman, Gordon Alexander, and Josie Valentin. And I'm just going to summarize them. That the City Council vote to declare property on South Bridge Street surplus property available for disposition, and that the City Council vote the same to declare surplus a parcel at 175 Oak Street. So with us are Marcus Morel and John Dijek from Office of Planning and Economic Development. Gentlemen, you want to proceed?
Sure. So the two parcels described here, the city has owned. I'm going to be frank. I'm not deeply familiar with both of these, so I'm not entirely sure how long we've owned them. So, John, if you want to jump in at any point, feel free. For some reason, we own them, and they haven't been part of a tax title auction. They've probably been owned for a while. There are a couple dozen of these probably around the city. The one on Appleton and Oak has just been, I think it's just vacant. It was formerly some sort of structure that was demolished or burned down. It's been a site with a lot of blight, sometimes dumping. The ward councilor had gotten or has received several complaints about uses on the site. I think vehicle repair on the site, which of course could create other problems if it's not addressed and there's leakages. That was taken care of with the Holyoke Police Department, is my understanding. So the desire of the two filers of that order, I think at the time, Councilor Alexander and Councilor Valentine, was to try to get some private interests, either someone who wanted to develop a structure there, probably 1 or 2 unit housing could fit there, or a complementary use to one of the abutters that would put it on the tax rolls, put it in a productive use, and it would put more eyes on the street. The one on South Bridge Street was a former residential property, I believe. It's definitely in a residential neighborhood. This recently came up because of some electric repairs to one of the abutters, and I honestly can't remember which one of the sides. And either the electrician and or the gas and electric was recommending having an easement over the property to have the meter facing forward, which is, I guess, the better standard. At that point, my concern, not knowing the property before, my concern was, well, if we start chopping up the property even before we know what private interest we have in it, it may lower the return to the city. So at some point, my suggestion to the law department is, why don't we just sell the property, and then if that resolves the issue and the abutter wants to buy the property, then we put it entirely on the tax rolls. Or it could be a private deal amongst the new owner and the other abutter. So I believe that was probably relayed between the law department and Councilor Roman. And so that's why we're here. It's just the interest of putting it out to an RFP, see if we have any takers, putting it back on tax rolls.
Okay, maybe Councilor Roman wants to ask a question, but just before he does, I know that Councilor McGivern always wants to have assessor field cards and a sense for what the value is. So perhaps for Tuesday night, perhaps we could have every councilor for both of these little parcels. Gentlemen, you can probably, except for a couple of councilors that don't do email, you could probably email the field cards, front and back, out to at least 2/3 of us, I think, generally work by email. Maybe the other third don't. So, and then if you want to just make sure you submit it to Ryan, so Ryan has it for the council president, and we can put it in the jacket. So, Councilor Roman, do you want to address this?
Yes, specifically for my order, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, the law department filed this, and again, 535 South Bridge Street is the specific address for this. It's a city-owned property, and one of the abutting tenants needed to put in a service box, but that lot is, it would actually be on the lot that we are trying to declare surplus. And then the building that abuts it to the left side those tenants actually in that building are already almost using the city-owned site without a permit or so the law department has proactively reached out to both abutting tenants of this lot, and they're interested in actually possibly purchasing half of the lot. But the abutter to the left is already using it as if it's theirs, and the abutter to the right needs it to install an electrical box. So we're trying to be proactive and get the city money and get this on the
Great.
tax rolls.
All right, great work, in my opinion. Okay, I wonder if, maybe they're low enough, the mayor can just negotiate the price? Is that how this works sometimes, Marcos?
I'm not familiar with the value, but it is, and knowing that that's the situation now, as I said, I wasn't terribly familiar with it, that may be a possibility.
What's the
The
threshold?
question would then be like, who does who actually divides the property, but if it's something that would be of more interest, probably through negotiation, it's better than a straight up request for proposals, which would,
A good fence would be a perfect divider for a
Yes.
property, a nice fence. Good fences make good neighbors.
yes.
You might want to keep that in mind, Ms. Lavelle. Okay, no charge for that advice either. Okay, well, any other questions from the committee? If you recall, we've had some little disputes about various, well, last time we transferred something to the HRA, we had a little dispute about it. But we now know that for rules, it only takes a majority of us to declare a surplus and or to transfer it. So we don't have to go into the 2/3 rule, so we will learn that lesson. Yes, Marcos?
And just for clarification, this is only for surplus, it's not for transfer, it
Correct.
remains in city hands, and it would be disposed of through the city of Holyoke, which would require coming back ultimately to the city council.
Yes, indeed. So that's all very positive. Okay. Can I get a
Motion to approve items number 3 and 4.
We're doing what, both of them together?
Come together,
Okay.
Pete.
Okay, I second that.
Okay, under discussion? None, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we'll recommend that these are declared surplus, and we'll again explain that mayor negotiates the price, or however you do it, whether it's RFP or auction, but it has to come back to city council for final approval.
Yep.
Okay, gentlemen. Yeah, the field cards, yeah,
Field
that's great,
cards,
John. And a copy to Ryan as well. Okay,
Great, thank you.
well, we're good to go. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me just get my notes together and.
Motion to take up item number 5.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, the motion. Let's take up item number 5. Order the commissioners of the Holyoke Gas and Electric and its general manager meet with the city council to discuss their vision, plans, and current projects, brought to us by our at-large councilor, Mike Sullivan. Now, Jimmy, do you want to come in? Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, come on, you're,
Don't leave Jim sitting there by himself.
okay. Now, Jim Lavelle, just hold on one sec, okay? Okay, so with us are the general manager, Jim Lavelle, and Jimmy, your title? The business liaison, Jim Jakowski. And as, this is a really good order, because it kind of gets some of the department heads, along with other ones that Mike Sullivan filed, gets the department heads coming into city council so we can have just a dialogue. And as I explained to Jim Lavelle a couple weeks ago when we spoke, that it'd be my opinion that the best way to do this is to have a little presentation from HG&E about where you've been, where you are, where you're going. Take 5 or 6, 10 minutes, whatever you need, and then we can entertain questions from the counselors here. And then the way it works is we'll take your information, and then I'll summarize it as best I can next Tuesday at the full city council meeting, and we'll let the public, we'll disseminate the information to the public. So,
Great.
with that, Ms. Lavelle.
Thank you, and thanks, Councilor Sullivan, for the order, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the invite. I did put some slides together, if I can give you copies of them.
Oh, great. Thank you, sir.
So the first page, I'm sure, I think most people are familiar with the first page of the slide. It was just a general overview. But I know we have some new counselors, and it's helpful for us, even internally, to remind ourselves about some particular numbers. But, you know, we've been around since 1902. We have 18,000 electric customers in the city.
So Jim, just make sure the microphone is kind of, yeah, just right there, so you.
Okay.
Okay.
We have 12,000 gas customers, and that's both in Holyoke and Southampton. The oversight of the enterprise is a 3-member commission appointed by the mayor but approved by this city council. Currently, Fran Hoy is our chairman. Bob Griffin is vice chair, and James Sutter is secretary. Our annual budget's about $70 million. It varies based on fuel prices every year. About 140 full-time employees, and our annual pilot payment is just under $1.1 million. So I think we're probably the second or third highest taxpayer. You know, that it's in the form of a pilot, but we view it as a tax, and we're happy to pay it.
So think about that. The HG&E's budget is 70 million. The city's budget, what is our budget? 130 million? Around 130 million. Pretty interesting comparison.
So the order requested that we give our vision of the enterprise, and the vision's really driven by our mission. And statutorily, our mission is to provide reliable utility services, good customer service, and competitive rates. So our vision, as we look forward, is to be recognized by our customers, our city leaders, as a model utility in providing reliable rates, providing excellent customer service, and providing competitive rates. So, and we're going to do that while focusing on strong financial performance, which is tied to competitive rates. If we don't manage properly the finances, we're not going to have competitive rates to offer our customers. We have a strong focus on environmental stewardship, and we're committed to maintaining full compliance in an ever-expanding regulatory landscape. In addition, we have a strong focus on economic development and supporting the city's initiatives in the economic development realm. So, I thought I'd put a few slides together to show how we're doing currently with respect to our mission and our vision. So, starting on slide 5 with reliability, we had last year received an award from the American Public Power Association. So across the country, there are about 2,200 public power entities. And APPA has a reliability review group that measures their members' reliability based on metrics. You see 3 metrics below that I'll get into shortly. But we've been getting what they call the RP3, or the Reliable Public Power Provider Award, for several years. And we've been missing the highest level, which is the diamond level, for a couple of years. But we finally got that last year.
Now, where's that conference?
What is that?
Now, where's that conference? Is that, where's that in, like
They
Buffalo or something, in the middle of winter? Where's that one, Jim?
It's not Buffalo. They have several conferences throughout the year. And I can tell you, we do send employees to certain conferences. I don't think anybody's been to the annual conference in a while, but we do training through them as well.
Important, yeah, important.
So we're proud of the diamond level award from APPA.
Congratulations.
Down below, the 3 indices that we've listed there, the first one is called a KD index. It measures the amount of time on average an outage lasts, or how long it takes us to restore an outage. And you can see we compare favorably to the regional municipals. We compare favorably to the regional investor-owned utilities. Those are the larger utilities, like what used to be Northeast Utilities, or Eversource now, and National Grid. And then there's a national average too. So we compare favorably in that metric. The one below that is the system average interruption duration index. And again, we compare favorably. So that's for each customer, if they have an outage, how long they should expect to be out. And then the last one is an index measuring how many times each customer should expect to experience an outage during a year. So those are the primary ones that APPA measures, and we do very well on that. And that RP3 award does not only just measure the reliability metrics, there's several management components that they evaluate, like planning and budgeting, succession planning, there's safety metrics, they look at all of our safety data, and several other operational issues. So the metrics are a key component, but they evaluate the whole enterprise. The next page, as far as customer satisfaction goes, we try to do a survey of our customers every 2 to 3 years just to see how we're doing. So this year we did complete a study with Great Blue Research, and these are the results from that survey that show that, you know, overall the customers are satisfied generally with both electric and gas services that they're getting. And, you know, the same survey they asked about other utilities, which they do in every survey we do. So although there's room for improvement, our numbers are pretty good right now, and we'll continue to, you know, look for opportunities where we can continue to nudge these numbers up. The next slide to get into how we fare with respect to our rates, and this is something we focus on quite a bit. On the gas side, we don't have as much of a competitive advantage as we do on the electric side. You know, the electric side, we manage end to end from generation to retail delivery on a good chunk of our portfolio. On the gas side, we don't do any exploration and mining, and we don't, you know, transmit, so we just take it off of the pipeline. But in spite of that, the residential rates, which is the top left, and the industrial rates on the bottom, were very competitive. The commercial rates, in the commercial comparisons, there's not a lot of variability, so it's a pretty flat curve on the comparison, and we're, you know, a little bit to the right of the middle. So our focus is currently trying to get that a little further to the left on the commercial rate.
So you say you take it off the pipeline, so what's our source for natural gas?
Tennessee Gas Pipeline.
Okay, and where do we connect with that?
Well, it comes off of the Agawam line, which comes Agawam, Southwick, and into West Holyoke. Our Mueller Road facility out at in West Holyoke is where we interconnect with what they call the Northampton lateral. So that line comes into Holyoke and it continues up to Northampton, and that's been the subject of, you know, the constrained pipeline, which Berkshire, it's forced them to put a moratorium on any new customers or any new business.
Thank you.
Next slide shows the electric rate comparisons. Now, all these rate comparisons are the average rates for the last 12 months. So the top is the residential rate comparison, and the bottom is the commercial and industrial. And we have remained at the front of the pack on these for quite a while. So, you know, we have some of the best rates in the region, but we still look for opportunities to nudge them down even further.
So just to point out to the public, Jim, if I could, when you even in terms of municipalities, we're comparing to Chicopee, and I don't see Russell on here, but I guess, but even compared to Chicopee and Westfield and South Hadley, HG&E is, you know, a significant percentage lower.
And I think it's a good point. I'd like to point out, too, if I could, that this is a worst case comparison for us, because we're at, as far as a comparative point goes, because gas prices right now are at an all-time low, recent low, and all these other utilities are largely dependent on electricity that comes from natural gas. We're pretty insulated from that. So as natural gas prices rise, these blue columns are going to go up quite a bit. And we're again, significantly insulated from that. Next page, just a quick update on financial performance. We have surveillance done because we have bonds outstanding. Moody's and Fitch, they look at us frequently. This is last year's rating where Moody's updated our A1 rating, as did Fitch. We'll probably have another one this year. We have a hard time. We think we deserve a better rating. A1 is good, but we'd like it to be better. But the way that they rate us as a utility is our room for growth, and they look at the economy and the other factors that, you know, really give them pause before they nudge that up. But we're financially strong. Next page, just some tidbits on our environmental stewardship. Again, our energy portfolio, we have over 2/3 of our energy comes from renewable resources, and over 90% of what we sell at retail is carbon-free. We have a large and growing...
But Jim, just renewable resources, why don't you just explain what that is real brief?
Renewable resources is any like hydroelectric, solar, wind, Carbon-free includes all the renewables plus the nuclears. So nuclear doesn't generate any carbon.
Thank you.
We've been focusing on energy efficiency. We replaced the city's streetlights, which is going to save about 60% of the streetlight energy, and that's a large chunk of the city's bill. And we also worked on some projects with the city for the city hall, some of the fire stations, and improving the building heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems for efficiency. And so over a 5-year period, we saved over 20% of the city's energy, which was required by the Green Communities Act, and we got funds from them to do some of those projects. But we did meet that target of 20% reduction.
So one of the orders, I mean, I filed it a long time ago, I know Councilor Leahy's been really pushing it, is the use of heating oil to heat this building.
Yes, and
So
we've
to
been,
get that replaced.
we had started to work with the former superintendent and going as far as getting a gas line. So I think, did we put the heating system? Yeah. So we actually did convert to gas. So
Yep. Yeah, so that's a home run. That,
yeah,
I mean, it makes a big difference, and it's so nice to have our old gas electric, heat the whole, the city hall. It's kind of a crazy system
yes.
beforehand, but that's a big improvement. Great.
Other initiatives, we're looking for other alternatives to reduce our carbon footprint and to reduce our cost. One of the things is we're committed to the environmental piece of it, but not at the sake of raising the rates. And we've been successful in doing that. So we look at energy storage, non-conventional hydro, and we've been doing some test bed projects with developers of new technology, and we've been working with the computing center partners, UMass and MIT, on certain development projects as well. Down below, we're required by our FERC license for the hydro project to do certain environmental mandates, and so that includes fish passage and threatened endangered species protection. Through those efforts, though, we did in 2006 get an environmental award from National Hydropower Association for the OSAR, Outstanding Stewards of American Rivers. And we're recognized in 2012 by the Environment of Mass Research and Policy Center for being second at that time only to Boston in the state for solar capacity. And earlier this year, the city got an award from the EPA for sustained excellence, largely due to all the activity on this page here.
Well done. Thanks, Jim.
Jim, is there any further talk or looking at the possibility of windmills?
Yes, we've been in discussions with DCR, and we failed to come to agreement on selling the property back to them. And so we will be looking, we've come to the conclusion that utility scale turbines, the very big ones, are going to be difficult to develop up there. So if we do take a run at another wind project, they'll be much smaller turbines. But we don't have anything currently on deck for that.
Thank you.
Next slide, 11. As I mentioned, supporting economic development is important to us and part of not only Jim's ongoing, and we look at economic development as helping the existing customers and trying to attract new investment into the city. So, our low-cost, clean, reliable power is something we promote wherever we can. We have the ability as a municipal utility to offer long-term contracts to customers, and that's not something investor-owned utilities can do today. I'll show you in a minute why that's important. We have the ability to be pretty flexible with connections to customers like the computing center. They want multiple connections. ISO New England wants multiple connections. Most utilities won't do it or it'll cost you an arm and a leg. We can do it economically and reliably. So in addition, we provide incentives to existing and new customers through economic development discounts, so they get an additional 10% off their energy for the first 3 years, and that's, again, a 10% off an already low rate. We have energy assistance for certain projects that are either energy efficient or otherwise qualify for the program. That's 0% that we give out for residential and commercial and industrial. And currently we have actually grants for some lighting projects, and we're continuing to try to get money out of the state that we pay in through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, but we have trouble getting it back. But we're trying to expand programs by getting money back from the state. And we're also active on the Holyoke Innovation District Task Force, which has been in place for a few years. And that's not only the Holyoke Redevelopment Authority, Marcos, who just left, but there's also regional economic development people there, and the West Mass EDC, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and you have the statewide people there through Mass Development. They have both their Springfield people and their Boston people plugged in. And Nelson, I know you've been to a lot of those activities, so it's an active group, and we're really looking to identify opportunities to get people to invest in this area. So some of the other things that we're doing that I mentioned test beds earlier. We're working with, some of it comes out of the computing center, we have a direct link to UMass with some of their researchers that we've been doing with big data development. And there's some hydro people that contact us because they want to do tests on new products. Part of what we do is our approach to economic development, say, hey, we'll work with you, we'll let you get in the canals and do a test on your product and help you develop it. But we really say, at the end, our expectation is that if there's going to be any development or success, you're going to start here in Holyoke, and maybe we'll give you a launch order, to help you get out of the box. So that's the type of stuff we're doing with a lot of, nascent companies and technologies at the moment. It's tough business. You could have 100 of them, and maybe one will succeed, but it's worth the effort in our minds at this point. The next slide, when I mentioned earlier the low and stable rates, the top graph is our residential rate over January 2008 to present. The green line shows HG&E's rate, so it's pretty flat, pretty stable. The upper red line shows the average investor-owned utility rate during the same period. The blue line below that shows the average municipal utility rate. The dotted black line shows the wholesale gas prices, the spot prices for natural gas over the same period. So you can see the red line tracks pretty closely the dotted line below. So, wholesale natural gas prices are setting the electric wholesale prices in New England. Down below, our large industrial rate is in the green, and the same thing again where the red line is the investor-owned utility. So if we get someone who's looking to invest in one of the investor-owned utility areas, and we go to them and say, hey, we can give you a much lower rate, and we can almost lock you in for a 10-year period, that's a strong advantage that we have, at least in the energy part of the discussion. So again, we market that where we can, and we look for opportunities to find large energy consumers that could really benefit from an approach like this. Councilor Sullivan's order also asked us to talk about some current projects. So the last slide really is just a list of stuff that we're just finishing up or is in progress. The first two are over at our Hadley Falls station at the dam. We were required by the FERC license to put in downstream fish passage facilities, which took the station offline for 6 months. So we took the opportunity during that period to overhaul one of our two generators at that facility. So we have a brand new generator over there with increased capacity, as well as the fish passage facilities. But that was over $30 million in capital for those projects. In transmission and distribution area, we've been doing over the last several years, and we will continue to do a lot of upgrading and modernization of our outside plant. Several substations have been upgraded or converted to switching stations. We just finished Oakdale, and we're finishing West Holyoke by the end of the year. We've also, our electric station down on Cabot Street is what we call our Holyoke 17L substation. We're currently redesigning a replacement for that unit. We've also been incorporating smart grid capability in the distribution system with automated meter reading and outage management capability so that we know an outage as soon as it happens, whether it's a neighborhood or one house. On gas distribution, we have a major project that we've been in process with for several years, and another one that's going to continue for many years is replacing all the cast iron main lines in the city with plastic, and or upgrading the cathodic protection. And also all the bare steel and coated steel surfaces have to be replaced. So what we do is we budget what we can during a particular year and chop a couple miles a year off the list until the regulators tell us to go a little bit faster, or until safety dictates that we move a little bit faster. We'll continue on that pace. In the telecom realm, we just completed an upgrade of our fiber optic backbone, so we now have 10 gigabit per second capability with our backbone and serving some customers with that bandwidth right now. We also are continuing to serve as network operator for the town of Leverett in their fiber to the home project, and we're continuing to look for other opportunities to expand our growth in the telecom. So I think that was an attempt at quickly hitting the mark from Councilor Sullivan. I think I'll happy to take any questions, comments, or on what I covered or anything I missed.
Thank you, Jim. We're joined also by Counselor Joe McGivern, and Mike, you want to sort of take it away from this point?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, Jim and Jim. This is all great stuff, and I think, first of all, I'd like to open by saying I think you've done an outstanding job down there over the years. I think we've got a world-class utility, and you know, what we're doing with green energy production, carbon footprint, all of this stuff is fantastic. What I'm a little disappointed in is why it doesn't seem to me that the city, and not the Holyoke Gas and Electric Department, but the city in general, why with all this that we've got going, it isn't attracting more business, more manufacturing interest in people developing in the city. So when I talk about the current projects, it's good to have an update on what H&E is doing to maintain its you know, forefront position. I'm curious what other development projects around the city we're taking on. You know, similar, are there more things coming down the pipeline similar to what went on with Aegis Energy, for example?
At the moment, no. I mean, we were very involved with the computing center project, you know, and we, the clean energy did get that discussion going, and that started back in 2006, actually, or discussions when it was MIT alone. And so that led us to, you know, try to start acquiring that property, cleaning it up, and putting a cleanup plan together and getting them to acquire it. And then now the HRA, I think, is suited with the ability to do that, where they had some, I guess, impediments to getting that for non-industrial projects prior to, but they're able to do that now for commercial and industrial, so they would be able to play that role today. But you know, I'm not aware of any other projects other than Aegis Energy or the Parsons site in the Quantum site right now that are in, you know, actively being cleaned up for development.
And neither am I. So that's another discussion to be had with some of these other groups. But so on the horizon right now, there's not much else in the lines of manufacturing development interest that you're hearing of coming to the city.
We do get inquiries fairly often. They'll either call Jim, they'll call me directly, or somebody else, and they don't want to start with, and a lot of them are site finders, so we do get a lot of inquiries. Utilities are only part of the discussion. Taxes, schools, public safety, all, you know, the key components of development play into it as well. Site readiness is a real issue for us, and we, unfortunately, the construct right now with the system is it's a chicken and an egg situation. There's money available if you have a project, but you get a project. A lot of times we'll get a project or call on a project. We had one recently. Hey, do you have a site? I've got a nice project. I got to be up and running in 30 days. The requirements for that one were, you know, we couldn't meet. So, you know, the solution is easy. You find the pot of gold that you can clean up all these sites and get them ready with. But again, the mass development funds are for, you know, environmental remediation only. Our sites have environmental remediation. They have demolition. They have everything that you are working with and see every day. But again, the system's not set up. Developers don't take that risk. You know, they want the site ready and permitted if possible, and ready to put a shovel in the ground.
Well, I'd have to skip ahead right now to talk about developers taking the risk. I'll come back to that. Can you tell the rest of the people, rest of the members here, about Scuderi a little bit? What the involvement with HG&E and what the potential is there?
So that's another one where
Or pitfalls?
it's another one of these development potentials. We got involved with Scuderi. They wanted to find someone to buy the output of their. They right now have a concept that. Let me take a step back. The Scuderi family developed a split cycle engine that's purportedly more efficient than a typical combustion engine. It's been in the lab for a long time. They've been trying to sell it to the automotive industry forever without success. So now they're trying to move that engine technology to the utility industry. Their concept is that they run their efficient combustion engine and they couple it with an off-the-shelf compressor and use stored compressed air. So it's compressed air energy storage. So the compressed air will end up running their motor rather than fuel or displace some of the fuel. So it's, in concept, a very efficient power generating cycle. They asked if we would buy the output, and again, we were looking for them to get a commitment to the Quantum site because it's a long shot at this point because they haven't demonstrated the concept yet. But it was another one of those opportunities where we said, all right, if you're willing to drop anchor down at a property that needs cleanup that allows us to get some money from mass development or any other resource to clean up that site, they were willing to not only put the project there, but go to manufacturing at that same site. So they're talking 100 to 300 jobs in manufacturing. So again, that was an area where they couldn't get their investors excited until they had a contract signed with someone willing to buy the output of the power. I mean, our risk was pretty low because we were just buying the power at a fixed price that, and we set the price equal to what we could get on the wholesale market. So we weren't giving anything up from a power standpoint or cost standpoint, but it helps lock them in on a site here.
Okay. So we've got Scuderi as a potential, and it's a bit of a long shot, but it could bring 100 to 300 jobs to Holyoke. You'd think at this point is that the redevelopment authority or economic planning and development or some of the rest of the city might be taking a bit of interest in this.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on outside of HG&E and Scuderi? Any talks?
I know that Scuderi has met with planning and development, and I know that he's met with the mayor. So I believe they're involved.
Okay. I'm not so sure of that. But so the competitive rates we've got and all of this stuff, unless someone comes directly to Holyoke Gas and Electric and asks for it, I don't see how they're out there being promoted through our economic development or redevelopment or how we're putting this out to big corporations to come here and look at us.
We've had, again, to get back to site development, and I think even through the Innovation District Task Force activity, we've had contacts come through those channels, only to find out that, the site readiness is an issue.
All right, so it's still coming back to site readiness.
Yes.
Jim's right, the big issue is large space readiness.
Jim, is your mic on?
Usually
Just hit that button.
Usually when we get a call like that, it's from somebody who's in an emergency situation almost, where they've lost a lease, they've gotten in a fight with a landlord, and they're looking for 80 to 100,000 square feet of move-in space. Unfortunately, the city has a lot of smaller spaces, broken up, multiple floors, it's not true manufacturing like we're thinking in the ways of the paper mills. It's more of retail distribution kind of, which is still great job creation if we could get a distribution center here, but it's a different atmosphere. They're all looking to be by the highways. They're all looking to be visible off, 91 and the mall corridor. We just don't have that 100,000 square foot facility that we could pop a big player into in a meeting. And honestly, as much as we can save them on the utilities, they're gonna look at the tax burden because the taxes are so high in Holyoke compared to some of the others, you know, so we're shooting ourselves there.
All right. Well, and either one of you can address this. One of the things, you know, myself and I think some of the other city council members, too, are, you know, as we get into it, we find as we get into site development, and, you know, especially if we turn it over to the redevelopment authority, we lose all control over it. We don't have any say in it at all whatsoever. So one thing I'm curious about was, they, on the Parsons site, we were presented with one package, and then they put an AUL, which I keep getting corrected on. I keep calling it alternative use limitation.
Activity use.
Activity use limitation, yeah. And now I find out they also put a BUD, a beneficial use determination on the property. Now, when we turned this property over to HRA, there was no discussion of any of this going on. Were you ever consulted in any way by the redevelopment authority about the any potential drawbacks or problems that this could present?
We were involved, I mean, one of our superintendents was pretty knowledgeable about that site because he's been involved in it for quite a while. And yeah, so, I mean, we were kept updated, yes, I would say, with regard to the, not the BUD, I don't think, unless that was part and parcel to the AUL.
No, they're separate from each other, so.
No, but I mean, as far as the discussion went, but we were knowledgeable of the need. Well, when it became known that they were, for us, we had reserved an easement on that property, so it became known to us that they were going to, you know, put some fill in there that would require an AUL. And knowing that we were going to have to go in there and dig, we wanted to make sure they didn't put it where we were going to end up digging in that, within that easement area. So that's how we got involved there, to make sure that they worked with us.
Okay. So it didn't, what they did not affect in any way your plans for hydro on that site. What is the status of that now? Are you still planning on hydro on that site, or is that not an option anymore, or?
We are still planning on it, but we haven't finished the design or budget. So in hydro development, just because of the permitting, is if we had the money in the plan today, it's 5 years out. It's just the way the permitting goes. So what we have done is we've worked with IGES, because IGES is trying to bankroll their project through their solar project. And he needed a larger project, and he wanted to go onto our easement area. So we gave him, we've agreed verbally, and we're going to put it to paper to allow him to build on that easement. And at such time when we come with a hydro project that's ready for development, he'll get out of our way.
All right, so that, just out of here, so they're going to use some of the land they're going to use now for solar panels, not the roofs of their existing buildings or the buildings also that were turned over to them. This is going to be put on the land itself.
That's my understanding.
All right. This one's kind of a tough question, Jim, but I'm called a couple of other people forward here, and we're having a little bit of a discussion about the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And as I read the state statute, the canals of Holyoke, Lawrence, and Lowell are exempt. And they're claiming they're not, and they're supposed to get back to us with some more information as to why they feel it's under their jurisdiction. Have there been any burdens or problems presented by the Conservation Commission in results to your plans or your usages of the canal, or extra expenses because of restraints or restrictions that have been placed not by Mass DEP, not by FERC, but by the Holyoke Conservation Commission? And do you feel that it, given what I've said about the canals of Holyoke, Lawrence, and Lowell being exempt, do you feel that they're overstepping their bounds here?
I don't think that we've researched that issue or the legal elements of that research sufficient to comment on the first part of it. And the second part of it, it would be great if we didn't have to go before all sorts of agencies for permitting, and there's no shortage of agencies for working around the waterways that you have to go to. So it's, it adds to the cost, it adds, to the headaches for a job, so.
Could you share with us some of the ways it adds to the cost? I understand we can't drain the canals all the way down anymore, is one thing.
Yeah, and that's more part of a state requirement with the water quality certification that comes with the FERC license. So there's mussels. There's the yellow lamp mussel and the dwarf wedge mussel that are protected by the EPA. And so those protections are mandated through the water quality cert. So yeah, we can't drain fully without getting, lots of approvals. We did have a matter where we were trying to work with Quantum Properties on a development where we would actually fill part of the canal in. That's already filled in, but it was determined to be an intermittent stream.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost.
Yep, okay.
All right. I'm looking back at here. I know you guys were incorporated or founded or formed in 1902. The charter goes to 1922, at which time it seems to me there was no dam, no solar, no wind, no fiber optics. Computers weren't invented. Holyoke is pretty much a two-game town, either paper or textiles. And you had a three-person. That's by state charter. They set you up with a three-person commission to oversee this. And I'm extremely disappointed that not one of the commissioners bothered to take the time to attend here tonight. Would it help to have a larger board that could bring more skill sets, a broader base of skill sets, to take on some of these development issues, to assist in bringing large developments, large manufacturers and stuff like that, and take on various projects than to just have a three-man board right now?
I guess when I look at our core mission, and not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think what we're required to do has been validated by, we're doing okay, and maybe better than okay, I think, in some areas, but not that there's not ever room for improvement in all of those areas. I guess I can't cite too many examples where more regulation and more oversight has led to lower costs or greater efficiencies. The city council approves the commissioners right now. There's not going to be anybody on that commission that isn't approved by the city council. I've seen some of the municipals have more than three, and I don't think those are good models from what I've seen, and I have limited data on some of those problems, but I don't see where a larger number would help in any regard. We know what the issues are right now for development. It's just a matter of, getting the resources to help out.
All right. I know that's a tough question because, in effect, they're your bosses too.
No, and you've got a good board. And if I could, our chairman was intending to be here. We got all of a week's notice, I think, of this meeting, and I believe our conversation went along the lines with, if any of them can come, great, but let's just at least get the discussion going. And we're happy to have an ongoing discussion. And if I had a little more lead time, I could get all of them. One of them just had a baby, and two others had prior meetings, and I think two of them are actually, depending on how late it gets, might be here anyway.
All right. So, as far as the Water Street Quantum development, so everybody knows, this is potentially the largest one. It's 14 acres, right in the poorest section of the town. I can't think of any site right now larger around that we have potentially available for development. We've all agreed that that's one of the problems for attracting people to Holyoke is developable property. And it seems to me this one's ideally situated. I'd like at this time to make a personal disclaimer for everyone on the council and everyone listening. I have no personal investment at all in Quantum Properties or the Water Street project. Right now, we need to do something to spur development at this site. Right now, it seems to be a little bit of an impasse with Holyoke Gas and Electric having some semi-active generation potential there, some units that are plugged off, some FERC licenses surrendered, some potentially being renewed. Could you give us a little insight on that, and possibly what some of the solutions may be?
Yeah, well, there were originally 8 generators at the site, and 2 were decommissioned just because when we purchased them, we knew they were at the end of life, and we had plans only to shut them down, so that was done. There were a couple others that were rendered useless due to some of the demolition activity on the site, and others that were, one was burnt down in a facility that was burnt to the ground and destroyed in that process. So the demolition activity has rendered just about all production at that site useless. So we've allowed much of it to be used for scrap to help the development of the project, because we would agree with you that's almost a 20-acre site that's islanded that would be ideal for manufacturing. So we've been trying to help that develop. We never went after that, the demolition company that damaged the units for damages for lost generation. So, we've been helping that. We haven't gone after for damages. We've allowed them to use scrap for, resources to continue to get the property back on its feet, because we know the property needs as much help as it's going to get.
And I know the owner appreciates that. The value they got for the scrap did help with the project, but it was still a far lesser number than if H&E had to put it out to public bid to remove the equipment. And some of the equipment was gutted out, and it's not 2 units that have been decommissioned, it's 4 units that have been decommissioned. The stuff that is still left behind is a major obstacle, and as we've had some discussions, a big stumbling point between HG&E and the developer. There's 2,800 linear feet of honeycombs underneath the place that could be a huge hindrance to any development on the property at all.
Yeah, so with regard to those tunnels, if you will, under the property, HG&E has an easement to operate its hydro units only. We don't own those, and we've got a legal opinion that says we have no responsibility to do anything other than what we've done.
Well, I'd very politely suggest, I don't mean to offend any lawyers here or listening, but the only people that would win in a battle like that are the 2 lawyers. If HG&E is right, they'd spend $500,000 defending their position. If Quantum Properties is right, they'd spend $500,000 trying to win it. And either way, 2 attorneys are going to get very wealthy, and the city's going to get nowhere for 5, 7, 10 years while it goes through the court system.
Oh, for the record, we have asked Mr. Shealy multiple times to give us any shred of evidence that demonstrates that it's an HG&E liability, and he has produced nothing.
Okay,
Okay,
so,
I'll end mine right here, because
Okay,
that's
yes.
we're going further than I wanted to go with it, Jim. But I thank you very much, and
Councilor Roman?
Yes, thank you so much, Jim Squared, for being here. I appreciate it. Jim, I thank you so much. I thank Councilor Sullivan for taking me on a tour, and I thank you for this detailed report. With regards to the environmental stewardship component, does HG&E come out with a list of reports of any of these facilities that are so old and what conditions they're in, what chemicals might be in any? Only because even in my ward, on my side of Water Street, I've looked at some of those, older, rusted, those drain outs, sections, all those things. And as a counselor, I would like to know and see those reports for those specific facilities, or those areas. Counselor Sullivan did a really good job of showing me on his side, but I went snooping around, just walking on Water Street, seeing what we had on our side. So is there any kind of report as far as the environmental stewardship goes that says, what kind of chemicals are in these metals, or, is this bridge or output station needing to be replaced? Do you have that kind of information available?
We have an inventory of any chemicals that are stored in any facility. We're required to maintain that even through the LEPC, the Local Emergency Planning Committee. But our, just from EH&S standards right now require us to have all the logs. So, as far as any chemicals that are, there aren't too many stations that have chemicals stored. There might be some oil or grease on site at a particular station, but nothing beyond that I wouldn't expect.
Okay, thank you. So again, as a counselor, only because I know I'm dealing with some other environmental issues in other areas in my ward. So is that report something that we can request from you? Are you willing to provide that to the council, or?
If you have a specific station or stations that you're concerned, because we don't have we have a list of, chemicals, certain place, if that's what you want. But it sounds like you're asking for a condition assessment of the facility plus a list of all the, stuff where we don't do condition assessments on an ongoing basis of existing facilities. We have a capital planning process where we look out at 5 years and say, okay, what are the obvious needs for capital improvements? And again, if you get a tour of the units down where Councilor Sullivan has focused his questions, that's the exception.
I'm talking about in my ward. And I have nothing to do with Councilor Sullivan. I'm just looking at the physical as a layman, looking out, and it looks like it's about to collapse. I would like specifically the ones on my side of Water Street, and I can get that specific list to you, what the conditions they're in, if they collapse, if they go tomorrow, what contaminants are in there. Is there any chemicals stored in there? I don't know that as a counselor, and I would like to for my constituents and for my residents as well. Thank you for that. Secondly, HG&E is the overseers of the current solar panel field on Grant and Meadow Street, correct? I know, and again, I just pulled it up on Google Maps. If you all, again, I know this is very site specific, but the maintenance of your solar fields, the gates and the green awning to kind of protect the neighbors and residents is constantly in disarray and down, and even on Google Maps from my colleagues here on the committee, it's down, and that's the recent picture. What is your update for those solar panels and checking in on the conditions of them? Because, I know, and again, my predecessor has filed orders on the replacement of that. They're constantly coming down, and it's an eyesore for the residents.
So just for clarity, we compile any requests or complaints on that facility, but we are not the owner, so we pick up the phone and we'll call Constellation and get them to respond. And we've been pretty successful in getting them to respond.
Okay. Yeah, and the response is good, but it continuously happens. And I know literally in the last 8 to 10 months, it just keeps coming down. And, if you're associated with it to the residents, they see that as HG&E. So it would be nice if we can get some better, sturdier kind of processes there. But it makes me think of the other solar panel fields that you are all associated with, just again as a challenge forward to make sure that those are reviewed by you, because then that's a reflection of you. But I just wanted to put that in your radar. And then my final question, Mr. Chairman, was around your Moody's report, just around your challenges around the South Hadley Falls section. I was just looking at that. I was wondering, has that improved? Are you, just, being a nerd here and reading the finer details, I know when it says in the challenges of that, how's the Hadley Falls station doing? Is it better? Are you guys doing good there? How's just the outcome of that? Just wanted to learn more about that because I don't know anything about that, and I'm excited to learn.
Was that the Hadley Falls section of the city, or
So it says, under challenges, increase in off-balance sheet leverage through multiple long-term contractual obligations in recent years, due to the finance and the purchase of new solar capacity and current improvements at the Hadley Falls station.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, the station is performing very well. Our biggest problem right now is we have no water. So it doesn't run very well without water. But, the new unit that we have in is larger than the old, so we are able to get increased capacity, and the incremental capacity actually qualifies for renewable energy credits, so we'll get more revenue from that. But yeah, it's, the units are well maintained, and we wouldn't have put $15 million into the generator if we didn't expect it to be running well for the long haul.
And again, I thank you both so much. You're doing a fantastic job. I know they were very, ward specific, like check mark box things, but I truly appreciate your response time to me has been beneficial. So thank you.
Happy to do it.
Council Solomon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks you, Jim and Jim, for coming down and giving us a good overview of the department and for keeping our rates in check. I think the community and our constituents appreciate that, our reasonable rates that a lot of communities don't have. It's something that's really important. One of the things I talked about several years ago on the council was internet service, or telecom. Is there anything on the horizon possibly to send out to, and I know it's a costly venture,
Yeah.
but to the community?
We'll have more to say, I think, hopefully by, if not the end of the year, first quarter next year. We're actually got to have a consultant working with us right now, because you may have read that Westfield Gas and Electric is rolling out their fiber to the home and neighborhood by neighborhood. So it is a costly proposition, and we've had competing capital needs on the energy side, so we have a balance sheet to manage too, and so we don't want a telecom project, eliminating an energy project that would help us keep the competitive rates. So it's a little bit of trying to find first thing is trying to find a viable business model in the telecom that allows us to reach more customers and potentially the residential, but then being able to finance it without impacting the energy side of the business.
Okay, my second question is something I filed last year, and again this past week hasn't been taken up yet, but wind energy, because we had an individual that wants to put up a windmill on his property, and of course I think they contacted G&E to go up there, and
Right.
So you might be aware of it, I don't know, but we have nothing really on the books about that, especially residential or commercial, for wind energy. So is there anything that gives us some kind of update on that?
Yeah, I think, it sounds like more of a residential project, but similar to what we've done with solar, we would probably encourage that and offer certain incentives if they could get, an alternative energy project, a distributed alternative energy project off the ground.
Okay, does that affect you then? I mean, with all the solar, does it help the G&E, and does it help the community, or?
It does. It depends at the end of the day how the solar at the residential level, how it's connected. And most of them, they're putting solar panels on their roof and we're buying it at the wholesale rate. So they're, rather than getting a full net metering credit like the state program is, we give them the benefit of that energy. And they can still make a project work. And we're also making interest-free assistance available to them for the project. So the benefit to us is on a peak day, if the sun's shining, it reduces our demand.
Okay.
And requires us to buy less energy or less capacity. So if those distributed resources are operating on a peak day, there is a benefit to us.
Okay. And I do read your minutes every month. I appreciate the getting that. And I look at the different projects that are going on. A lot of people, you help a lot of people and businesses with this low energy rate, which is helpful. I even used it at one time. And that's something that people just pay on their bill.
Right.
For electricity, for a new generator, a new heating system, windows, or whatever, you still have that program that's ongoing.
We do, and Jim could be more accurate with the numbers, but we've slowed down a little bit because we had such a rush when the energy prices were high in 2008, 2009, but we were doing several hundred a year.
Yeah, over the last 10 years, we've averaged probably $1 million a year in assistance to residential and small commercial. But the last year or two, we've kind of saturated most of the gas conversions and whatnot, so the numbers are going down a little bit, but still very active. People take advantage of it wherever they can.
Right. And I notice in your bills every quarter or so you send in a little newsletter and about what's going on with the G&E. And one of the things that I think the public should be aware of is audits. You still do that? Energy audits come into people's homes through our company?
Yeah, so we do a free winter checkup for customers, although the time to sign up has passed, I think. But we do about 700 or 800 a year, where our service techs will go out and get the heating system. If it's a gas-fired heating system, they get it ready, do a full checkup, check the filters and everything else, make sure it's running. So it's a pretty good value for the customers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman McGivern?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, one of the areas we've had discussion about in the past is the gas and electric owns a lot of property in the city. and rightfully so when it's, for the needs and purpose and use of the gas and electric, that certainly makes sense. But sometimes, one example, when the dam was purchased, a lot of property came with that. I know through the HEDIC, there was a marketing effort to put that property on, up for sale and to find the best potential buyer and, more important, user for the property that makes sense both to the gas and electric and to the city. Two questions. One, I'm interested in a piece of property, but the first question is, do you still agree that even though the gas and electric sits separate on its own state law, establishment, it is also a city, so to speak, department. Therefore, if property is sold, it needs to go through some type of city local approval. And with that in mind, is there any updates on the train station? I was down there with my partner in probation today and driving by saying what a wonderful restaurant, slash, commercial retail space that would make.
So we had recently gone out for public bid on that station. We were aware of 2 potentially interested parties for that. So the update was we went out to bid, put it in the Central Register, put it in the New England Real Estate Journal, and any other publication, and we got no bids. So we're back to ground zero with trying to find a developer for that site. But I did see, and one of the parties that we contacted has already developed 2 exact replicates of that station for restaurants on the eastern part of the state. And the other one would have been more of a commercial development, but due to the historic, the commercial development was deemed to be not viable because of the size of the facility, and the historic tax credits would have required that he have more square feet to develop and more income from the property.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what are you gonna do with it now?
We have been keeping it buttoned up, like we made some repairs to the roof, so we're maintaining it from disrepair, but we would like to sell it. So we're continuing to look for someone to sell it. If not, we may redevelop it for our own use, but I don't even want to say that because I haven't talked to my board about that yet.
See, you should have been here.
So the best option for us is to find someone who can take that property and maintain it and put a good tax-producing project in it.
Does HG&E own any kind of similar properties? I don't mean with an improved building, but in the downtown area or?
No, most of the property we had, unfortunately, came along with the hydro acquisition. There was, a list of properties that had to come with, it was deal or no deal. So, those were never intended for utility purpose. And so I'm not aware of any property, well, even Mount Tom, that's the biggest piece of property we own right now. It's the 270 acres on Mount Tom, but that's intended to be used for utility purpose.
The roughly 10 acres off of Sullivan Road, that's still alive.
Yes.
It's more, there's less than 10 acres that can actually be developed, but I know HEDIC is still working on that for you.
Yes, and I think there's about, you're right, maybe half of it's developable. So they looked at maybe a 30,000 square foot development would be about all you could do up there.
Okay, well, thank you, Jim. Jim, thank you so much. We'll just take a motion to be complied with, I guess, right?
A motion that the order's been complied with?
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Oh, you're, okay, 4-1, okay.
Yep.
All right.
The commissioners didn't show up, so.
Well, let me just before you say,
I'm opposed.
well, just in fairness, though you did file the order, it's sometimes, I don't want to speak out of school here, but sometimes it's really the maker of the order who should either contact the chair or contact the person with whom they want to have in. I was working with the administrative assistant last week who's been here 3 nights in a row, so I appreciate that, Ryan. And then when we were going through the jacket, we saw this. So in fairness to the commissioners, we're all very dedicated servants of the city. I didn't really get a hold of the manager until last Wednesday maybe, or last Thursday. And I think, I was just grateful that he could come on board at this. And then frankly, you can refile an order and we can do this again, in the spring, Jimmy. I mean, or whatever, when you have a little more lead time than 7 days. So, that's kind of how the process works. I don't necessarily, plan these meetings out, months in advance. So that's how that happened. But okay,
Mr. Chairman, it also becomes a problem with the commission itself in the open meeting law. If all three commissioners come and it's not a posted meeting for them, it's difficult for them to discuss or even hear discussion on what we're talking about in terms of, city council business. And that's, yeah.
Yeah, to get a quorum, you're in trouble, right?
So it takes even more, foresight, before
So-
we can invite a board in.
yeah, so, yeah, it really does. So maybe next time, what we maybe think about doing is getting the chair, because you rotate the chairs, right? You rotate the chair every 2 years? Is that how you? It's really up to them. Okay, so you don't rotate. Okay, all right. So however that works. But
If it's helpful, we're planning on doing a ribbon cutting of sorts in spring projects that we did over, so we can bring.
Is your mic on? Your mic. So
well, we haven't adjourned
Sorry
yet,
about
so-
that. So we're, next spring, we're targeting to have a ribbon cutting of sorts for all the new projects that we've just completed over there. So, we'd just definitely like to tour the city council through that, and if it makes sense to have a presentation first before that, and then a tour, however you'd like to do it.
Oh, that'd be great. So you can just contact me, Jim, maybe a few months beforehand. I can file the appropriate order and we can proceed from there, okay?
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank you
just,
very
Can
much.
you get a motion to adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.